Okay, so first off, thank you for giving me your time.
Yes.
And the reason I wanted to bring you on is because you and I will have these conversations, right? Like we're just like catching up. And then you bring on these topics that are so important and so relevant to our generation and our region. And one of the topics that we kind of brushed up on was mental illness is still viewed as something that's not real in our culture, when in fact it is. And I've had like my own experience with it, and I had to really take a proactive approach in my life to remedy it because I wasn't receiving the support that I needed, from the people in our society. If that makes sense.
Right.
What has your experience been with it?
Well, I think for like a lot of people, they don't realize that they have some sort of like mental illness. They're not even aware of it.
That's true.
And yet they time after time, they're having problems and issues, and it's just recurring and recurring, and it's like, well, why can't I get this right? Why, are my relationships failing? Why can't I connect with my family members, with my friends?
Yeah.
And it's like, what am I doing wrong? And it's like, well, it's not necessarily that you're doing something wrong. It's just that there needs to be like self-reflection and like inner searching to see, it's like, okay, well, my relationships haven't been doing well, whether it's romantic or friendships. It's like, what has been the underlying cause of this? It's like, okay, well, people say that I get angry too often, or that I just am a terrible friend and I never want to go out and I want to do anything, and people, they're always inviting me, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's like usually the first step is like, okay, well, I'm seeing a problem, and what's the solution for that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So I think that based on what you're saying, self-monitoring, and I think that unfortunately a lot of us let it get to a point to where our behavior has caused something to happen that is really bad before we take the necessary steps to do like okay, wait, pause. Is there some merit to this? Is this like a reoccurring issue? And then how am I feeling? And I think that we put that question of how am I feeling on the back burner so much because we have just been conditioned to just work and produce, and we have almost forgotten ourselves.
To add to that, I do think that there does need to be the support system there. Because like usually, like either where it's at work or on a phone call or just hanging out with a friend, it's like, oh, like, so, hey, how you doing? Just the automatic response is what? Like, no, I'm doing okay. No, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And it's just a habit that we say is like, no, I'm fine. But then really, like in the morning, you were crying like on the way to work. And then it's like, okay. It's like, oh, good morning. And then it's like, how are you doing? And it's like, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But I think that people feel that they can't express that. They can't express themselves. They can't open up to coworkers, to friends, to family members.
That's true.
Maybe even like just outside help with a professional. Because it's like, well, like I don't want to like bother anybody. I don't want to burden them.
Yeah.
It's like they probably already have like a lot on their plate, and for me to be like casting my woes, on them, like give me your ample bosom so that I can like rest my weary head.
Yes.
So I think having the proper support system, like a very good friend. You don't need to have like 20 or 100 friends.
Like
whether
one.
You just have like one who just listen to you and basically to vent.
Yeah.
And I think, and I was reading in this book that I had to read in high school called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. There's one for adults, but for teens. And so in that book, one of them was that as soon as you tell your problem to somebody else, that weight that you're carrying immediately gets cut in half. So it's like, okay, well, now Marisa knows, this that I've been struggling with, it's like, okay, and she's giving me some advice. Okay, well, I feel like I can breathe a little bit better.
That's a beautiful thing, you know. And is it because people are not willing to impart compassion and empathy onto others that that bridge is not always crossed as readily as it should? Do you know what I mean?
I think because since we don't give our feelings or share our feelings with people, I don't think we know how to do it the other way around. We don't know how to listen to people. We don't know how to, I guess, empathize or what advice to give, because we're also, you know, with our own problems. So it's like, how can I help you? Like, you know, like I have something in my eye, but hold on, let me do your mascara. It's like, okay, well, no, because, right? So it's that kind of, I guess, like thinking, I guess.
You know, and it almost like makes me want to like retract, and it makes me think about those moments like when you are talking to somebody or you're just engaging with someone and you'll like see if there's like something stuck in their teeth.
Oh.
And then are you the kind of person that's going to let someone talk and just let them talk without being like, hey, you have something in your teeth? Or are you going to be that person that's like, thank you for saying that, but like real quick, like you got a little something right there.
That's true.
Yeah. So jumping back in then, if you really take the time to be present with someone when they're taking the time to interact with you, you'll see it when it's off. You'll see it in the droop of their shoulders, their posture, the heaviness of their stride, and like the way that they move their face when they talk. If you pay attention to those little things as they're talking, you'll be able to pick up if something's wrong or not. But that's just from my point of view. So when I see that things are off, I try to take a moment with these people, anybody, to be like, are you okay? And sometimes that makes all the difference because it opens up the gateway for that dialogue that they need. Because even if somebody's like telling you their problems, that doesn't mean that you have to carry that weight for them.
No.
All you're doing is you're just being like a receiver of their words so that way they can get whatever it is that's stuck inside them out. Do you know what I mean?
That's good, yeah.
And now that I think about it, this is something that I learned because I never had that as a child. And I think that's why I try to give that to people so much now, is because I realize how important that was, or it is.
Yeah.
To give somebody like that opportunity, because it's not something that is really practiced in our culture for, you know, parents to stop and give like their kids a moment to be like, are you okay? What do you need? Do you know what I mean? Is that something that you experienced?
Or, well, I guess just before I give my experience, or I guess just like that, it's like kids going to the parents being like, hey, can I tell you something? And immediately it's like, what did you do? And then it's like, so then it's like, well, they're really immediately going to assume that something is wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, no, it could just be anything. It's just a conversation with what's hopefully your role models, which are your parents.
Yeah.
But yes, those are my 2 cents on that.
Mm-hmm.
But my personal experience with that, I don't think that I personally am the best person to like have someone like share with me and then for me to like empathize with them. But I think that I do do that that you do. I pick up on people's like body language and like the way that they say things, the tone, you know, the inflection or the lack thereof. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, like this person's, you know, in a bad mood or something's going on with them. So it's like, I know and I see it, but I don't think that I can do that because I can't. I guess I never learned it from like anyone, right? And well, I guess that's where, you know, self-monitoring, you know, I'm aware of that. And so I try and I will be trying to exercise that and to get stronger with that.
And especially now because of COVID, we're all like, we all feel this need to increase our distance amongst each other. And that's fine. You can still maintain your 6 feet, but my capacity to engage in conversation with you to where I ask you, are you okay? And I say it in a genuine, caring way so that you feel like you can actually open up is something that we need to be reinforcing right now. Now more than ever, because of COVID, we shouldn't be afraid of each other. We should be opening up ourselves in a more compassionate and caring way, so that way those around us, like, they feel seen, they feel acknowledged, they remember their power. And the reason I say this is so important right now is because the growth that we're expecting for our region, who's going to support this growth?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the type of growth that I would like to see personally, somebody has to be like behind the scenes creating these small ripples, so that way as the development occurs, it's in a way that is going to support a more positive community. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, and I agree. And like providing, maybe not necessarily like, or maybe yes, creating like support groups with like, well, because I think the stigma in that is that young people, they don't really want to talk to like older people, because then it's like, well, like your generation just doesn't understand us, because like, you know, we had to like, they didn't have technology, and so we grew up with that like super fast. And so what affected the, I guess, like our parents' generation, they didn't have social media, they didn't have internet back in the day.
They had like Chisme in the living room.
Yeah, yes. So it wasn't, or like, or I guess what you could compare it to, maybe not social media, but like family gatherings, where it's like, ay, ¿qué dice el novio? O, fíjate que, you know, que tu prima, you know, ya se casó, you know, y ya se te va a correr el tren. That puts a tremendous amount of pressure, whether it's on a man or, you know, a woman.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm like 18, like, you know, but that was back then. And so now, like, the problems and stresses that they had, or mental illnesses that were derived from the social pressures that they had back then, are very different from the ones that we have now.
Yeah.
Now we have access to the entire world, and we see like all these people like on Instagram, and so it's like okay, well, now, you know, like I'm being like, you know, my body, it's like okay, I need to look a certain way, and so then that, you know, leads to like not, well, also mental, but then also like physical illnesses such as like bulimia, and
that's so true,
and that kind of thing. Or like being obsessed at being at the gym. Yes, you know, being active and being physically fit is important, but to a certain extent, and the reasons why you're doing it.
Yes, I agree. So I'm glad that you said that, because one of my ways of mitigating like depression and just like these very heavy and like negative thoughts is through physical fitness. You know, like I have a terrible temper. I am not going to lie. All right. I'm just going to own it. Okay. When I get mad, I get mad. But instead of coming out and saying like hurtful things to somebody or being destructive, I save it for the gym. You know what I mean?
Some Krav Maga.
You know what I mean?
Boxing.
I box. So part of like the workout, like it changes. And earlier this week, I was just kind of like in a bad mood. I was just like, I just was not feeling it. And I asked my coach if like we could throw in the tire, because it's like a tire and you have a hammer and you hit the hammer on the tire. You know. So like it gets to that part of the circuit, and I was like, oh yeah, we about to let out the crazy though, you know? So I start like going at it, and like I'm on hit number 20 on the tire, and my coach is like, are you okay? He's like, remind me to never get you mad. And I was like, it's too late, bruh. It's too late. She's already here. Okay. And I mean, I have to burn off the crazy, so to speak. I hate to say it like that, but I mean, like,
we're crazy.
Honey, that's what it is. Okay. So I did that, and I also practice like meditation as a way to kind of center into myself, but it also allows me those opportunities for self-reflection, you know, to check in with myself and be like, hey, why are we feeling this way?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I was on TikTok earlier this week, and I saw this cool thing. And I was like, damn, like when I'm a mom, like I hope I'm this kind of mom, because this mom is showing like her son, and he's like in a little like nook corner that she made like super cozy for him. And he has like a little area to paint and draw, and it has like words and toys in it, but it's like very calming and soothing too. And she said at the beginning of COVID, you know, because like they're all having to like teach their kids from home, she was having a lot of behavioral issues, right? And discipline wasn't working, right? It just wasn't working for him at all. But then she created like this space for him to where he could sit with his feelings and ask himself these questions of, why am I feeling like this? Created a safe space for him to feel his feelings and express, right, through these different mediums. And I was just like, damn. Even as adults now, a lot of us don't create that space for us to feel safe to feel our feelings.
Wow.
Yeah. And imagine the kind of world that we would live in if we had more adults that would take the time to love in and on themselves in such a way to where you create a safe space for you to ask yourself these questions. How am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And what can I do so that way I don't feel this way? Or what situations do I need to no longer put myself in so that I don't feel this way? You know what I mean?
And I would say that safe space can be like literally anywhere. Like I think my safe space is like in my car.
Really?
Like I go and I'm in my car, and then I'm like listening to like Celine Dion, and I'm like singing, and then like I go and I get like McDonald's, and then I park like at a store like in the parking lot, and then I'm like eating fries, and I'm like okay, why am I sad today? And then I'm like, oh, well, no, I had like a terrible meeting. It's like, okay. It's like, why else am I mad? I'm like, oh, my sister did this. It's like, okay. I'm like, well, no, I think I just need to get over that. And it's like, oh, okay, I understand why I feel angry now. And I was like, it wasn't even for anything. Like,
really?
Yeah, so it's like, it could be like super simple things, and it's like, but...
Do you think it's because like these super simple things add up?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
It adds up, and then eventually you're just like, I cannot with this ish anymore. Out comes the diva. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. I would say that I'm not a rude person, and I'm try to be very polite with with mother and her husband. But like whenever I am angry, I'm like, mother, I try to maintain, a calm voice. And then this one time, her husband was just being like, como quien dice, imprudente. Like he was just being like, just asking like the most
personal questions.
No, like the most dumbest questions. Like whatever the task was. He's like, well, how do you do this? I'm like, I've already explained to you how to do it. And then he wasn't doing it on purpose. But he was just like asking, and I guess he was just oblivious to the fact that, it was getting to me. And then I answered rudely to him. I was like, I don't even know what I said. And it was probably something very ugly. And then he immediately noticed it. And then, I don't want to say he called me out, but he did like talk to me about it. He's like, are you mad? I was like, no, I'm not mad. He's like, you're obviously mad. I was like, I'm not mad at you. I'm just... And I think this is where the segue is. I think you're allowed to feel your emotions. You're allowed to feel. Yeah. I don't want to say don't wallow in it. Like if you're feeling depressed, it's like, okay, I'm doing this now. It's like, okay, let me feel depressed. It's like, okay. It's like, why am I depressed right now? It's like, okay, this and this. Why am I angry? Why am I sad?
Yeah.
To allow yourself to feel those things, because as my mom's husband saw, like he's like, are you mad? I was like, I'm not mad. He's like, so
yeah,
I guess
I really like that you shared this experience with us, because it circles into two things: self accountability and self responsibility, all having to do with the self, right? And if you can fully embrace those two things, you're able to keep yourself in check, right? Because, and I've said this to friends, I've said this to family, your happiness is not my responsibility.
It's true.
My presence is to add to it, right? I am here to help you vent and express and to feel. But at the end of the day, the way that you feel is not my responsibility.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yes, it is really important to have that support system, people around you that are going to, you know, be like, hey, are you okay? That are going to be loving, caring, kind, and supportive. But you have to take enough time to love yourself enough to see yourself for everything that you are and everything that you're not.
Yeah.
And be okay with it. And I know that sounds like really basic to say, but I mean it in the most loving way possible, because like even me myself, I like for a while I had like this disconnect between like my body and what I wanted it to be. Growing up like very curvy, voluptuous, you know what I'm saying?
We love that.
We got a dump truck, okay? Like, and like trying to fit into these jeans and like whatnot, it just was not happening. It took me a while to kind of like accept that how everybody else wanted my body to look was just not going to be it. And I had to accept myself for the way that we are. I am. Yes. And it's a beautiful thing. I think now it's a beautiful thing. You know, like I have my moments like over the holidays, your girl gained like 8 pounds, right? And I was like looking at myself in the mirror and I'm like, where did it go? And I was like, oh, well, obviously it went, it went downstairs. You know what I'm saying? And like I told my friends and they were like, girl, like it looks fine anyway. Go make some papas. Because apparently like when I cook papas, like it shakes a little bit.
Oh.
So yeah, now that's the inside joke that everybody's in on. Go make some papas. Go ahead.
Well, I guess terrible segue, but like I recently have been, well, I want to say dabbling, but I've participated in our counseling services that are provided from our employer, and the first time that I went, I felt very silly. I was like, what the hell am I like doing?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, what am I going to tell this person? You know, like, I don't know. Well, it was a her, the first one. And I recently just finished my last session with my second counselor. Anyways, yeah, the first one, it was extremely like eye-opening. And one, she was a woman. And then two, she was part of the LGBTQ community, right? And then she like, I don't know, I guess it just like, we had just like that instant connection. And so she's like, okay, like what seems to be the problem at work? You know, I'm like, okay, well, like I'm feeling stressed because of this and this and this. She's like, okay, well, you know, you need to identify, you know, what your stresses are and then, you know, take steps, you know. It's like, okay, if you're being overwhelmed, it's like, have a planner. And I was like, okay, well, knowing me, no, I'm not going to keep a planner. But I was like, okay, I'll do some other stuff, you know, Post-its, you know, one step at a time. And then something interesting that we talked about was in one of our sessions was that one, like being Hispanic, one being, you know, in the field that I am in engineering, and then 2 or 3 being part of the LGBTQ community. And then 4, like talking about mental health, she's like, this is like groundbreaking stuff. She's like, we need more people like you, or I guess like me, right? Or like Marisa, who's over here, you know, talking about it. You know, we're over here talking about it. And then I told her, I was like, well, like in our Hispanic culture, it's always like, oh, like, ¿sabiste que tuvo que ir a un terapista? It's like, oh, está loco. And it's like, oh, it's like, okay. And so I told that to my therapist, and then she's like, no, she's like, people who come and seek, you know, mental health help, they're not crazy.
Yeah.
She's like, and it's not something negative. Like, it doesn't need to have a negative connotation around it. She's like, so we need to be more open and more willing to participate in these health services.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, like, yeah, that's true. And so she's like, keep doing that.
Yes.
I was like, yes, of course.
Yeah. You know, and I think a lot of people have this negative mindset that think that therapy is unreasonably expensive. That's not true. Because I've been to therapy, and I had this one therapist. I would pay like $60 a session, and that's for like a full hour. Sometimes it would be 2, but she like wouldn't charge me anything extra. So like even if you're gonna go once or twice a month, it's a really good investment.
Yeah.
You know, and like you can call around, and I'll try to put up a list like in the description bar, or maybe like even on the website, of like local therapists and anybody that has like reasonable rates, so that people can feel comfortable not only to add that into their budget, but to reach out and get that help. Sometimes we don't want to talk about our problems with the people that we care about and are closest to us, because we feel like there's something negative or bad about it. And like, there's nothing negative and bad about it. But if you want someone else to go talk to, then, you know, I will do everything I can to give you those resources, so that you can do that. Because let me tell you, I feel like I met this other layer of myself that was hurt and causing all these negative things when I started going to therapy. Going to therapy made me more comfortable with who I am, more loving towards who I am, and being okay with everything that I've been through. You know what I mean? And like and I'll never forget it. You know, she told me, she's like, you should have been a politician. And I was like, why? And she's like, because you're very good at circling around and redirecting people when they try to ask you how you're doing.
Oh.
You know what I mean? You know, like I will completely, like in a very subtle way, like change the entire dialogue, because that's something that I don't want to talk about with people. You know, and like a lot of people, they don't care, right? But the people that do care, let them in.
Yeah.
Open the door, make some tea or coffee, have some pan dulce with them, whatever, you know what I mean? But don't be afraid to reach out to people. If that person ends up being a stranger at first who later becomes a confidant, cool. You know, but I think we really do need to normalize therapy. You're not crazy. You know, you might be working on you and falling more in love with yourself and accepting yourself for everything that you are, and other people might not always accept that, and that's okay. And I think that's one of the hardest things about going through this journey, going through this process, is because when I started to love myself more and see myself for what I am and who I am, people around me couldn't handle it. So I had to remove myself from that. You know, not everybody gets that luxury to where they can just automatically separate. But I want anybody that's listening or watching this to know that you are valid, you are worthy, you are beautiful, you are deserving of love and abundance and happiness and all the wonderful things in the world. And simply because somebody else does not understand your journey through that entire process does not mean that it's not valid.
That's true. You know my name, but you don't know my story.
Exactly. Do you even want it, the whole life, to be quite honest? Yes, I do.
And I think like the cool thing about seeking like professional mental health help is that it's a professional, unbiased opinion. And they're not just doing it because it's like, oh, well, I'm the therapist and you're the patient. It's like, well, I didn't like the way that she was talking, so I'm just going to tell her like what she wants to hear. No, like if they're going to tell you something, if they're going to offer you a piece of advice, they back it up with like case studies and like facts and, you know, all these things. It's like, well, you feel like this certain way, and well, this and this and this, you know, statistics show that this and this is most likely the underlying, you know, reason, and then you're like, oh, it's like, okay, so I'm not the only one, you know, it's
exactly.
It's other people, you know. So I think that's cool. Well, because yes, you can go and ask your friends, you can go ask your family members, for just some advice or for their opinion on a problem that you're having. But they're always going to, I guess the word would be like diminish or belittle, I guess, how heavy it is for you. I think they belittle it or make it seem like, oh, like that's fine, like you'll get over it, like you're gonna be okay. But then you go to a professional and they don't know you, they don't know your story, they just know your name, and they give you the facts. It's not their...
They shoot straight with you.
Yeah, it's not their own personal opinion, it's facts, and they're there to help guide you through what it is you're going through.
That's beautiful.
So I think that's cool.
I agree with you. So thank you so much for talking about this topic with me. Yes. Yeah, that was good. Found it. Anyway.